HOA sent fake cops to smash my door. But what they didn't know was that my wife was already investigating them, undercover. It started with a knock. Then glass shattering. 3 men in police uniforms storming my front porch. They shouted like real officers. But their badges looked cheap, their voices shaky. And the way they came at me, it didn't feel right. And then, just as I thought it was over, my wife stepped out from behind me. And what she revealed changed everything. Welcome to HOA Max Stories. I'm Tom. I live in a quiet neighborhood here in the United States. And I'm just an ordinary homeowner, but my HOA? They've dragged me into drama I never asked for. Now, before we get into this crazy story, I want to ask you something. If you're over 50, you know how wild these HOAs can get, right? So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, just like you'd wave back to a neighbor across the street. And while you're at it, let me know down in the comments, where are you watching this from? I told you, it all started with that knock. And the glass breaking. I was standing right there in my own living room. And I could feel my chest pounding like a drum. 3 men in uniforms, yelling, waving around like they owned my house. And I just froze. At first, I thought maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe they were at the wrong house. But then I looked closer, and I knew something wasn't right. Their uniforms, they didn't look real. The stitching was off, the badges were crooked. And the way they held themselves, it was sloppy. Real officers don't act like that. Real officers don't scream and shove without saying why they're there. But these men, they came straight at me. One of them slammed his crowbar against the doorframe. The sound still rings in my ears. Another one shouted, "You've been warned, this is your last chance." Warned? Warned for what? I had no idea what they were talking about. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't about the law. This was about the HOA. For months, my mailbox had been filling with letters. Fines for unapproved paint color. Warnings for grass too tall. A $100 penalty because my garbage bin was visible from the street. It was harassment, pure and simple. But never in my life did I think it would come to this. As they shouted, my wife Sarah stood just behind me. I remember glancing back at her, and she didn't look scared. Not even a little. Her face was calm, her eyes locked on them. Like she had been waiting for this moment. That calmness gave me a strange strength. And I said, "You can't just break into my house. Show me your badge." The bald one, the loudest one. He smirked and held up something shiny. But from where I was standing, I could see it. It wasn't real. The numbers were wrong, the seal looked printed. It was a toy in a cheap wallet. Sarah stepped forward, just one step. And the whole room changed. She was holding a folder. On the front, in big letters, it said "Wanted." I didn't understand what she was doing. Until I saw the look on those men's faces. They stopped. For the first time, they stopped yelling. And that silence? It was heavier than their shouting. Sarah's voice cut through it like a blade. "You picked the wrong house," she said. Then, she reached into her jacket. And pulled out something that made my jaw drop. Her badge. Her real badge. FBI. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My own wife, the woman I thought worked a boring desk job in the city, was standing there, flashing a badge, like it was nothing. She turned to me, her eyes soft for a moment, and whispered, "I've been investigating them for months." Everything inside me twisted. Relief, shock, confusion, pride. All at once. The fake cops looked at each other. They weren't so tough anymore. Their crowbar lowered a little. Their voices cracked when they tried to speak. And Sarah? She didn't back down. She held out the folder, opened it, and showed them their own faces inside. Mugshots. Records. Evidence. Everything she had been collecting. I couldn't believe it. All those late nights she told me she was working late. All the time she seemed distracted. She wasn't hiding from me. She was protecting me. Protecting us. But as I stood there, trying to make sense of it all, I kept thinking about the months leading up to this. The HOA letters. The strange cars parked across the street. The people whispering at meetings. Had this all been connected from the start? I wanted to ask her. But I didn't dare break the moment. Because those men, those so-called cops, they were trembling now. Sarah's voice didn't waver. She told them, "We know everything. And you're not walking away from this." And for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. Now here's where I turn to you, my friends. You've heard what happened when those fake cops came to my door. You've seen how my wife turned the tables on them in 1 second flat. But tell me this. If you were standing there, in my shoes, with 3 men screaming at you, breaking your glass, flashing fake badges, what would you have done? Would you have frozen like I did? Or would you have fought back? Drop your answer in the comments. Because I really want to know. Even after the shouting stopped, my house didn't feel safe anymore. The air was heavy, like all the walls around me were listening. I couldn't shake the thought, if the HOA was bold enough to send fake cops, then what else were they willing to do? My wife's words echoed in my head. I'd been investigating them for months. Months. And I hadn't known. I sat down that evening with her, still shaken, and asked, "Sarah, what exactly have you been doing?" She leaned back, her eyes tired but focused, and for the first time, she let me into her secret world. She told me it started small. At one of the HOA meetings, she noticed a man in the back, not a resident, just watching. When she asked around, nobody seemed to know him. But he kept showing up. And then, the fines started. Every week, another letter. Every week, another threat. It wasn't just us. Neighbors had been hit too. A retired couple down the street got fined for having their car too dusty. A single mom was charged $250 because her kids' bikes were left on the porch. At first, everyone grumbled but paid. Nobody wanted a fight with the HOA. But Sarah, she smelled something bigger. So while I was busy mowing the lawn, fixing the roof, doing all the normal husband things, she was following the money. She found bank statements, shell companies, records hidden in plain sight. The HOA wasn't just collecting fines. They were laundering them. Using fake invoices. Hiding payments. Paying people who didn't even exist. I felt sick hearing it. These were our neighbors, people we waved at in the morning. And yet behind closed doors, they were building a machine of greed. Sarah didn't stop there. She connected dots. Late night deliveries. Unknown contractors showing up without approval. And worst of all, she traced money from the HOA president directly to men with criminal records. That's when she knew it wasn't just corruption. It was crime. She looked at me and said, "I couldn't tell you, because the moment you knew, you'd be in danger too. And I wasn't ready to risk you." Hearing that, I didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified. I'd been living in my house like everything was normal, while my wife was playing a game of shadows right under my nose. But it all made sense now. The strange cars. The people whispering at meetings. The cold stares when I drove past. They weren't watching me. They were watching her. And still, she stayed calm. She kept working. Every night, while I thought she was filing reports or answering emails, she was piecing together a puzzle, one that led right back to our front door. I couldn't help but ask her, "Why didn't you go straight to the police?" She shook her head slowly. "You think the HOA doesn't have friends in high places?" I needed proof strong enough that no one could bury it. And tonight, they just gave me exactly what I needed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the folder she had shown those fake cops. Inside were faces, documents, even recordings. And right there, at the top of the list, was the name of the HOA president. A man I'd shared coffee with. A man who'd shaken my hand at block parties. A man who once helped me move my couch through the front door. I felt betrayed in a way I can't describe. This wasn't just money. This was personal. And the scariest part? Sarah told me. The fake cops weren't acting alone. Someone ordered them to come after us. Someone higher up. Someone who knew we were getting too close. I looked at her. And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear for herself, but fear for me. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me jump. A car door slamming, footsteps on the sidewalk, even the wind against the windows. I kept wondering, what's next? If they failed tonight, what would they try tomorrow? By morning, the neighborhood felt different. Neighbors avoided my eyes. A man I'd known for years suddenly crossed the street instead of waving. The mailman delivered our letters without stopping. It was like the entire block knew something, and I was the last to find out. I sat on the porch, drinking coffee, watching the street. And I realized. My home didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield. And every smile, every wave, every friendly good morning could be a mask hiding something darker. But Sarah? She stood tall. She told me, this is just the beginning. And we're not backing down. I wanted to believe her. But in my heart, I couldn't help but wonder. If the people we thought were our neighbors had already chosen sides. So let me ask you something. If you found out your HOA was secretly working with criminals, would you fight back and risk everything? Or would you pack up, sell your house, and walk away? Tell me in the comments, because I really need to know how you would handle it. The morning after that night, I couldn't sit still. Every creak of the house, every car driving past, felt like a warning. But Sarah? She walked around calm, pouring her coffee, flipping through her files, as if nothing had happened. I asked her, aren't you worried they'll come back? She looked up, half smiling. They always come back. That's how they make mistakes. Her confidence gave me a little peace, but only a little. Because as I glanced out the window, I noticed something odd. A black sedan parked across the street. Two men inside, pretending to read the newspaper. They didn't even try hard to hide. I pointed at the window. Sarah, look. She sighed, like she had expected it. They're watching. That's fine. Let them watch. It amazed me how calm she stayed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. That afternoon, I walked outside, pretending to water the plants. The men in the car stared back. I lifted my hand, waved, even smiled a little. They didn't move. Just stared. It felt like being trapped in my own yard. Later that evening, Sarah spread her files across the dining table. Names. Numbers. Photos. She told me everything she had pieced together. The HOA president wasn't working alone. He had a circled board members, contractors, even a local security company. Together, they were running scams. Fake repairs, inflated bills, fines that never went into HOA accounts but into private pockets. It was a web, and every strand led back to our neighborhood. And those fake cops? They weren't random thugs. They were connected. Men with criminal histories, hired muscle used to scare homeowners into silence. I couldn't believe it. All this, in a neighborhood where kids rode bikes down the street, where we had barbecues every summer, where everyone waved hello. It felt like waking up and realizing your whole life was staged. But the worst part was realizing how deep it went. Sarah leaned in and whispered, I think some of our neighbors know. I think some of them are in on it. I froze. I thought of the man across the street, always smiling but always asking too many questions. The woman next door, who once told Sarah she should stop asking so much about HOA business. Were they part of this? Or just afraid? That night, I couldn't sleep again. Every sound made me flinch. And then, around 2 a.m., I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, right outside my window. I held my breath. Sarah was awake too. She put her finger to her lips, signaling me to stay quiet. We listened. The crunch of gravel, the creak of the porch step. And then, silence. Suddenly, the door handle rattled. Someone was trying to get in. I grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, my hands shaking. But Sarah? She was already on her feet, moving toward the door, steady and fearless. She motioned for me to stay back. The handle rattled again. Then, a shadow passed by the window. And in the faint moonlight, I saw it. The same bald head from the night before. The leader of the fake cops. He was back. Sarah pulled out her phone, already recording, and whispered, "This is what I was waiting for." Her voice was steady, while my knees felt like jelly. The man banged on the door. "You think you can hide? You think this is over?" His voice was low, threatening, almost gleeful. I wanted to shout back, to tell him to leave. But Sarah shook her head, mouthing, "Let him talk." And he did. He ranted about the HOA. About how nobody disobeys them. About how people who fight back regret it. His voice carried through the night, and I knew this was more proof. Finally, after what felt like forever, headlights appeared at the end of the street. The black sedan pulled up. The bald man glanced over his shoulder, then backed away. Within seconds, he was gone. I exhaled, my chest aching from holding my breath. But Sarah? She stopped the recording, saved it, and looked at me with that same calm fire. "We've got him now." I sat down, shaking, trying to steady myself. "How can you be so calm?" I asked. She looked at me softly. "Because fear is what they want. And I won't give it to them." Her words stuck with me. All night, I thought about them. Maybe that's why she had been able to dig so deep, why she had been brave enough to face them. And maybe, just maybe, that's why I had to stop being afraid too. The next morning, the HOA sent another letter. This time, it wasn't about grass or trash bins. It was personal. It said, "This is your last warning. No fine amount. No official stamp." Just those words, typed out and slid under my door. Sarah picked it up, read it, and laughed bitterly. Good. They're desperate. But me? I held that letter in my hand, and I wondered. If this was their last warning, what would they do next? So tell me. If someone slid a note under your door saying, "This is your last warning," would you laugh it off? Or would you pack a bag and run? Drop your answer in the comments. I need to hear what you'd do. That letter, those 4 words burned in my mind, "This is your last warning." I kept staring at it, over and over, as if reading it one more time would make it make sense. But it didn't. It only made my hands sweat, my heart beat faster, my head spin. Sarah didn't flinch. She folded the letter, slipped it into a plastic sleeve, and placed it neatly into her folder of evidence. To her, it was just another piece of the puzzle. To me, it felt like a countdown. That night, I couldn't sit still. I kept walking from room to room, checking the windows, double-locking the doors, even though I knew locks meant nothing to people willing to smash their way inside. I peeked outside and saw that same black sedan, still there. Watching. Always watching. Sarah sat at the table, typing on her laptop, papers spread everywhere. I asked her, "Don't you ever get scared?" She looked up, calm but sharp. "Of course I do, but fear is like fuel. It keeps me moving." I wished I had her strength. All I had was this knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. The next morning, I decided to confront someone. I walked across the street to my neighbor, Greg. Greg had been in the neighborhood longer than I had. Always friendly, always smiling. But lately, he'd been distant. When I asked him, "Do you know what's going on with the HOA?" his smile faded. He looked over his shoulder, then back at me, and whispered, "Don't get involved." I pressed him. "Greg, they sent fake cops to my door. They threatened me. They sent me this letter." His eyes widened, but he didn't look surprised. He leaned closer. "Just let it go. Pay what they want. Stay quiet." That was the moment I realized he knew more than he was saying. And maybe he was scared too. I walked back to my house, feeling like the ground beneath me was shifting. If even Greg wouldn't stand up to them, who would? Sarah was waiting for me. She didn't ask where I'd been, she already knew. "They've got people scared," she said. "Fear is their weapon. But once people see the truth, that fear will break." Her words gave me a strange kind of hope. But before I could reply, we heard it. A loud engine. A truck pulling up. Not delivery, not a neighbor. It was a black pickup, tinted windows, parking right in front of our house. 3 men got out, all dressed in plain clothes, but carrying tools, a crowbar, a hammer, something heavy I couldn't even name. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They walked straight to my fence and started tearing it down. I ran outside, shouting, "What are you doing?" One of them smirked and said, "Violation. HOA order." Violation? They didn't even check. They just ripped. Sarah was right behind me. She didn't yell. She didn't panic. She pulled out her phone and started recording. The men noticed. One of them cursed under his breath. Another barked, "Put that phone down." But she didn't. She zoomed in, captured their faces, their tools, the truck's license plate. Every detail. And then, something strange happened. A few neighbors stepped outside. They didn't come to help, but they watched. I saw curtains move, doors crack open, eyes peeking out. People were seeing this with their own eyes. The men tore at my fence for a few more minutes, muttering threats, before jumping back in the truck and driving off. But the damage was done. The fence was half gone, my yard torn apart, my home violated again. I wanted to collapse. But Sarah? She smiled faintly. They just gave us more proof. That night, she uploaded everything, the recordings, the pictures, the audio of the threats. She sent it to people I'd never met, contacts she trusted. And for the first time, I felt like maybe the walls around the HOA were starting to crack. Still, I couldn't shake the fear. Because if they were bold enough to send men in broad daylight, tearing down my fence in front of the whole neighborhood, what would they do behind closed doors? I walked through my broken yard in the dark, the smell of splintered wood in the air, and asked myself if we were safe anymore. Sarah walked up behind me, resting her hand on my shoulder. "Don't lose hope," she whispered. "This is the storm before the calm." Her words gave me comfort, but only for a moment. Because deep inside, I wondered how many more storms were coming. So let me ask you this. If men came to your home in broad daylight, tearing down your fence under the excuse of HOA orders, would you confront them face to face, or would you stand back quietly and record like Sarah did? I'd love to hear what you would do. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I thought the broken fence would be the worst of it. But I was wrong. Because sometimes, the most dangerous attack isn't a hammer smashing wood. It's a whisper behind closed doors. The very next day, I started noticing the whispers. Neighbors in small groups, talking quickly when I walked by, going silent as soon as they saw me. It was like the whole block had been warned. Warned about me. When I went to grab my mail, Mrs. Davis, the sweet old lady who always baked cookies for the kids, turned away, pretending not to see me. When I waved at a couple walking their dog, they crossed the street without a word. And when I pulled into my driveway, Greg, the same neighbor who told me to stay quiet, shut his garage door as if he didn't want to be seen near me. The HOA wasn't just attacking my house. They were isolating me. They wanted me cut off, alone, easy to break. Inside, Sarah was calm as ever. She watched it all unfold and whispered, "This is how they control people. They use fear like a leash." But I was angry. I didn't want to be leashed. I didn't want to live in a place where people looked at me like I was guilty of something. That evening, we decided to go to the HOA meeting. Not to sit quietly. Not to pay their fines. But to look them in the eyes. Walking into that room felt like walking into enemy territory. The board sat at the front, polished smiles on their faces, papers stacked neatly, acting like everything was normal. But their eyes told the truth. Cold. Calculating. Watching every move I made. When I stood up to speak, the room went silent. I told them about the fake cops. About the threats. About my fence being destroyed. I told them I had proof. And I told them I wasn't afraid anymore. The board members shifted in their seats. The president, Mr. Collins, leaned forward and said, "Those are serious accusations, but without evidence, they're just stories." Sarah stood beside me. She didn't raise her voice. She simply held up her phone and played the recording. The room filled with the bald man's voice, screaming threats, bragging about how nobody disobeys the HOA. The sound of the crowbar hitting my door. The words, "You've been warned." Every head in the room turned. Some gasped. Some whispered. And for the first time, I saw cracks in the board's confidence. But Collins didn't flinch. He smiled, leaned back, and said, "That recording could be anyone. This is slander. And slander has consequences." His words sent a chill down my spine. Not because he scared me, but because I realized how deep this went. He wasn't denying it out of ignorance. He was denying it because he thought he was untouchable. We left that meeting with eyes on our backs. Some neighbors avoided us, but others looked at us differently. One woman slipped a folded note into Sarah's hand as we walked out. Later, when we opened it, the note said only 4 words. "You're not alone anymore." That note gave me hope. Maybe people were scared, but they weren't blind. Maybe they just needed someone to stand up first. That night, Sarah spread her files across the table again. But this time, she wasn't just collecting. She was connecting. She showed me how money moved from HOA accounts to private bank accounts. She showed me contractor invoices with the same handwriting but different names. And she showed me photos of men being paid cash behind the clubhouse. It was bigger than I thought. Bigger than anyone in the neighborhood knew. I asked her, "Why don't we take this straight to the FBI?" She looked at me with a small smile. "I am the FBI. But I needed witnesses. I needed more people willing to step out of the shadows. Tonight, I think we found the first one." Her confidence was unshakable. Mine was growing, but so was my fear. Because late that night, the phone rang. An unknown number. When I picked it up, a voice whispered, "Drop it, or next time, it won't just be your fence." Then silence. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. Sarah wrote the number on a piece of paper, her face steady, her hands sure. She didn't even blink. They're desperate. That's good. Desperate people make mistakes. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how far they would go. Would they come back with more men? Would they torch my house? Would they try to hurt Sarah? But then I thought of the note. "You're not alone anymore." And I realized, maybe the tide was starting to turn. So now I want to ask you. If you were at that HOA meeting, sitting in the crowd, and you heard that recording with your own ears, would you stand up and back me up, or would you stay quiet, afraid they'd come after you next? Tell me honestly, because your answer says a lot about the kind of neighbor you'd be. The night after that phone call, I barely slept. Every time the house creaked, I thought they were back. Every passing headlight made me think someone was watching. But Sarah? She was steady as a stone. At dawn, she brewed her coffee, sat down at the table, and opened her files again. As if nothing had happened. I envied her calm, and I hated my fear. But I couldn't ignore what I saw when I opened the blinds. A notice pinned to my front yard. Big red letters across the top, foreclosure warning. My knees nearly gave out. How? I had paid every bill, every mortgage statement, every tax. But when I read closer, my heart sank. It wasn't from the bank. It was stamped with the HOA seal. They were threatening to take my house. I stormed back inside, shaking. Sarah. They're trying to take the house. She read the paper once, then placed it calmly on the table. They don't have that power. Not legally. This is intimidation. But intimidation works, especially when it's stapled to your front yard for all the neighbors to see. That day, whispers spread faster than fire. Neighbors pointed as I walked by. Some shook their heads with pity, others with fear. And one, a man I'd never spoken to, muttered under his breath, "You should have kept quiet." The pressure was crushing me. I started to wonder if maybe Greg was right. Maybe I should have stayed quiet, paid whatever they wanted, and lived in peace. But Sarah wasn't built that way. She told me, "This is the turning point. They've pushed too far. And now, they've given us the proof we needed." That evening, she made a call. I don't know who was on the other end, but her words were sharp, precise, almost military. She gave dates, times, names, even license plate numbers. When she hung up, she said only one thing. "Tomorrow, they'll learn what it feels like to be watched." The next day, unmarked cars rolled into the neighborhood. They didn't look like police. They didn't look like FBI. But I knew instantly these weren't ordinary cars. They parked casually, blending in, but the people inside, they weren't here for a barbecue. For once, the HOA wasn't the only one watching. I felt a strange surge of hope. But it didn't last long. Because that night, the HOA made their boldest move yet. We were sitting in the living room when the power went out. Not just our house, the whole street. Everything went black. Silence, then whispers outside. I grabbed a flashlight, hands shaking. Sarah stayed calm, peering through the blinds. I heard footsteps, the crunch of gravel, and then a voice. Collins. The HOA president himself. He was outside my house, in the dark, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You think you can expose us? You think anyone will believe you? This is bigger than you, bigger than your little FBI tricks. Walk away, or we'll bury you." I froze. Hearing him there, not in a meeting, not behind a desk, but at my doorstep in the middle of the night, it sent chills through me. But Sarah? She stepped outside. No flashlight. No weapon. Just her voice. "Collins," she said firmly, "every word you're saying right now is being recorded. Every agent in those cars down the street is listening. You've already lost." The silence after that was deafening. I imagined his face twisting, realizing he wasn't untouchable anymore. And then, without another word, the footsteps faded. The lights flickered back on minutes later. The hum of refrigerators, the glow of lamps, normal life returned. But nothing felt normal anymore. Because I knew that was his last warning. Not on paper. Not whispered over the phone. But in person. I sat down, my head in my hands, and asked Sarah, what if he's right? What if this really is bigger than us? She leaned closer, her voice steady but soft. Then it's time to make it bigger than them. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just fighting for us. She was fighting for every neighbor too scared to speak. For every person silenced by fines and threats. For every family bullied into paying money they didn't owe. This wasn't just our story anymore. It was the whole neighborhood's story. So let me ask you. If you were sitting in the dark and heard your HOA president outside your house, threatening to bury you, would you step outside and confront him like Sarah did, or would you stay hidden, praying he'd leave? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know whose side you'd be on that night. The night Collins stood outside my house, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was anger. Deep, burning anger. For months, I had lived under their threats, their fines, their fake cops, their whispers. But hearing his voice in the dark, promising to bury me. That was the moment I realized, enough was enough. The next morning, the neighborhood looked the same. Kids on bikes, sprinklers watering lawns, neighbors pretending nothing was wrong. But behind the curtains, behind the fake smiles, I knew the storm was about to break. Sarah was already moving fast. She gathered every piece of evidence, the recordings, the photos, the letters, even the foreclosure notice. She organized it all, neat and sharp, like a blade ready to strike. And then, she called a meeting. Not an HOA meeting. A neighborhood meeting. Word spread quickly. Some people came curious. Some came nervous. And some came terrified. But they came. For the first time, the people who had been silenced gathered together in one place. We met in my garage. The same garage where I used to store holiday lights and tools, now turned into a battlefield of truth. I stood there, looking at the faces of my neighbors. People I had waved to for years. People I thought I knew. And I said, "You've all seen what's been happening. But tonight, you're going to hear the truth." Sarah stepped forward. She didn't shout. She didn't lecture. She simply pressed play. The garage filled with voices. The fake cops screaming. The sound of my glass door shattering. The bald man bragging about the HOA's power. And then, Collins himself, threatening to bury us. The room went silent. No whispers. No excuses. Just silence. Then, the murmurs began. A man in the back muttered, "I knew something was wrong." A woman near the front wiped tears from her eyes. And Greg, the neighbor who told me to stay quiet, stood up and said, "They came to my house too. They threatened me if I didn't pay extra." I stayed quiet, and I regret it. One by one, stories spilled out. The retired couple fined into debt. The single mom threatened with eviction. The family who had their car towed for no reason. Everyone had been a victim. Everyone had been too afraid. But not anymore. By the end of that night, we weren't just neighbors. We were witnesses. And together, we were strong. Sarah sent the recordings, the testimonies, and the evidence to her contacts. Within days, unmarked cars became marked ones. Agents in suits. Police cruisers. And warrants. The day they arrested Collins, I was standing on my porch. I watched as the man who once smiled at me during block parties was led away in handcuffs. His face twisted with rage, shouting that we'd regret this. But his words carried no power anymore. Because the truth had already buried him. Other board members followed. The fake cops were tracked down and arrested. The shady contractors disappeared like ghosts. And little by little, the neighborhood began to breathe again. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Not because the fight was easy, but because it was over. I looked at Sarah, the woman who had carried the weight of this war without telling me at first. The woman who faced down criminals, imposters, and even our own neighbors. And I realized, she wasn't just my wife. She was my shield. My warrior. My hero. Now, when I walk down the street, neighbors wave again. The fear in their eyes has been replaced with relief. And the HOA? It still exists, but it's under new leadership, watched closely by people who now know better than to stay silent. Life is quieter now. But I'll never forget the nights of glass shattering, fake badges flashing, and whispers in the dark. Because those nights taught me something. Home isn't just a house. It's the courage to protect it. And now I want to ask you. If your HOA ever pushed you this far, threatening, bullying, even sending imposters to your door, would you rise up with your neighbors and fight, or would you walk away to find peace somewhere else? Be honest. I really want to hear your answer in the comments.